Welcome to Dronecast, Rethinking Public Safety One Drone at a Time, a podcast by DroneSense. We explore real-world applications of drones in emergency response, offering a close examination of evolving trends in drone technology and its impact on public safety. I'm your host, John McLeod, Director of Customer Success here at DroneSense. Hello, and welcome back to Dronecast, Rethinking Public Safety One Drone at a Time. Today, we're sharing part 2 of our conversation with Matt Rybar. If you missed part 1, you can find it linked in the description. Let's jump into the conversation now. Yeah, it's great advice about sometimes starting small with some of these programs and not overdo it from the jump while you're still learning. And one of the things I've noticed is DFR is becoming more common when I read in the newspaper every day, in the public consciousness. I mean, in sci-fi shows, right? And the ubiquitous of it has always been kind of tied to drones that are using docks or drone in a box, however you want to call it. It's starting to become synonymous with DFR, but that's not always the first step or the first phase in starting a DFR program for a variety of different reasons. So I'd love to hear from you for folks who are going down that path or made the decision to go down that path. What's kind of the best phase one and why?
Absolutely. So oftentimes a fully integrated DFR system is not the best first step for an organization. And so don't be afraid of starting with that DFR 1.0 solution. What is DFR 1.0? Well, it's visual observer on the rooftop. Sometimes that visual observer is the pilot that's physically flying that aircraft to the calls. Other times that pilot could be in a remote operations center at a different location. But that DFR 1.0 solution allows you to start down the process of gathering actionable intel, understanding what that program could look like, testing out a launch site before you build out a bunch of infrastructure there. And so all of those different aspects are just so important that help you build the data for that program. Also, I would argue that every agency across the country that has a drone program can do a DFR 1.0 solution at basically no cost. And how do you do that? Well, you have an aircraft, you have a drone team that's trained and certified. Sure, there's some regulatory things that you must overcome and you have to operate within your current approvals, but you could still in most situations start to gather data for a couple hours a week or a couple hours a shift, rotating your teams through those positions. And so there are so many easy ways to start out that DFR program without diving all the way deep in. Now, the agencies that would like to dive deep in and have those fully integrated systems, well, thankful there's companies like UBT and DroneSense that can help navigate that whole process. But it's really important to start small and really find ways to gather that data, test your theories, test your launch sites, and then evolve that program from there. I would be remiss to say that public trust has to come into that process as well. And so when you start to build that public trust through your normal drone program, through your DFR program, if you have data to show how you got to your conclusions about how you're going to operate, even what hours, what shifts you're going to operate, launch locations, and show exactly how you selected all of that, it's going to be a more seamless process on the public trust side because they're going to understand that you did the research and homework to enable this robust DFR program. It wasn't just like, hey, let's get a bunch of equipment and toss it out there and see what we can do.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way to describe it too, because I think for some folks, they think, well, this is hard, but I can copy and paste another agency's documents, submit my information. That's good enough to get off the ground. Really, there's a lot of thinking that goes into these programs, right? There's a lot of local geography conditions that you really have to think about in having a good team together, an interdisciplinary team to work on these problems and set you up for success, and making the time is sometimes the hardest thing because we're all so busy,
Absolutely.
Right? It's hard to pull away if you're a patrol officer who's been voluntold to start a drone program and go to conferences, educate yourself, read papers, connect with other people. And that's why it's so important to have good advocates for yourself in your program as you do it, because these aren't toys, right? I mean, there was a time where you could go buy a drone at Radio Shack, and also Radio Shack existed, that were little and play around in the backyard. But these are enterprise level solutions. These are very complex pieces of machinery. And you are flying an aircraft that's unmanned in the national airspace. And the FAA really cares about that a lot. They want to make sure that you're flying in a safe and appropriate way. So all of a sudden we're talking about Part 107, COAs, BVLOS waivers, all the other intimidating acronyms. When I remember being in kindergarten and people are going around the circle saying what they wanted to be when they grow up, no one mentioned wanting to know the intricacies of the FAA, right? But that's necessary to a degree to be successful. And so when you're talking to folks, again, who are kind of at the beginning of their journey, how do you lead them, or what do you tell them they need to know about compliance, particularly in the federal space?
Well, John, neither did I, sitting around the kindergarten circle, think that we would be here and we would have this desired knowledge. But hey, somebody's got to know it, so that's why we're out here. But it's really important for operators to understand, and really, I say operators, but it's the baseline pilots that take all this knowledge back to their command staff typically. And so it's really important for them to understand that there is a difference between a public aircraft operator, or COA's Part 91, versus the Part 107 operator as a civil operator. And so while things have definitely changed over the years, we have to sometimes dial it back to the basics. And even though it seems like, ooh, public aircraft operator, that's a brand new thing. What is this all about? Dial it back to the basics, and agencies have been conducting public aircraft operations under Part 91 with manned helicopters for the history of the FAA. And so that was always the framework that they allowed public safety to operate under, was under Part 91 as a public aircraft operator. So it's only naturally fitting that under drone programs, you're going to start to have a little bit more leniency and a little bit more forward thinking under Part 91 than maybe you would under Part 107. Because under Part 107, the FAA looks at you as a civil operator, just like a commercial operator, just like anybody else operating the national airspace. The only carve out they can truly have for public safety, for equity of the airspace, is under Part 91. And so oftentimes you see this debate back and forth. Where should we be operating under? Should it be 107? Should it be 91? And I would argue there's a place for both of it, actually. Now, what I'm about to say, neither John or I are lawyers. Neither John or I have a law degree. So we have to carefully tread down this path. But as agencies start out and decide where they're going to operate under, there's some benefits to the Part 91 side. And that comes really with BVLOS as these DFR programs start to expand. So a couple years ago, the FAA dabbled with something called Tactical Beyond Visual Line of Sight. And this was a low altitude, we'll call it sneak and peek type of BVLOS waiver. So imagine that fire scene where you need to fly the drone on the backside of the fire to collect actionable intel, but you might lose visual line of sight because you're launching from the front side of a building. You're keeping it at a low altitude. To be honest, many first responders probably would have conducted it anyways, even though it was slightly bending the regulations. However, a couple years ago, the FAA gave us that leniency under that Tactical Beyond Visual Line of Sight waiver to do exactly that. How does this keep evolving? Well, over the last couple of years, we've ended up with the first responder BVLOS waiver, or also called DFR BVLOS, which allows us to have that visual observer on the rooftop and have them basically sterilize the airspace and say that they could detect a manned aircraft within a 2-mile radius of wherever that drone is flying. In most situations, that puts you at about a 3-mile operating radius, because you can say that you can see a manned aircraft from the rooftop up to 5 miles. Therefore, they let you operate within 2 miles of that. So you get about a 3-mile operating radius. And that's what a lot of these DFR 1.0 programs are using right now to operate under, is this first responder BVLOS waiver under their Part 91 COA. Lastly, the most coveted true BVLOS waiver, very limited right now. And thankfully, I think we should have some approvals coming down the path very soon from the FAA if you follow kind of the natural progression here. But true BVLOS requires additional technology to alert those pilots of manned aircraft in the airspace. And so the FAA is worried about non-compliant traffic in the airspace, because us as the drone operator, we still have to avoid all those manned air traffic, even if they're in the wrong and we're in the right. It's carved out in the regulatory environment that way. And so these true BVLOS situations are using detect, alert, and avoid technology, whether that be vision detection, radar, or other different detection platforms that can alert that teleoperator of those aircraft in the public airspace. And so the FAA has been so wonderful to work with on these programs. They sometimes get a bad rap for how slow they're moving on some of these programs. But at the end of the day, their number one priority is to protect all of us when we're on a 757 flying across the country. And so it's going to take some time for this fully to be integrated. But thankfully, there are many DFR programs that are starting to operate in these types of environments, prove the data, gather that, give that back to the FAA. And the true BVLOS approvals are starting to come in using that detect and avoid technology as the main mitigation tool that the FAA requires.
Yeah, and a couple of good points from that. One is shout out to the men and women of the FAA for keeping us safe in so many ways. we take for granted. We really appreciate you, even as we struggle sometimes to understand your paperwork. And neither Matt and I practice law without a license. So just know that this is an evolving area as well, too. So if you're listening to this at a later date, be sure you have the most current information as well, too, because we're also learning as we go, as we do all these things. And that's what makes it super exciting. So let's pivot a little bit to the area that you and I probably nerd out on a little bit more and is exciting. And let's talk a little bit about the fun stuff around dock solutions. These are really interesting pieces of equipment. And I'm not going to call them toys, but they sure are fun to play with and really, really cool. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of the dock solutions you guys are offering today and what you like about them?
Absolutely. Well, what don't I like about them? That would be the better place to start oftentimes, because it's any nerd in the drone space. The docks over the last 2 years have really revolutionized our thinking and thought process. You could absolutely remotely control aircraft before, but the thought of having a dock and being a seamless remote operation is just so incredible. And we've got 4 docks on a platform at our demo site. And every time I pull in there, I'm still just so impressed about those capabilities on those different platforms. As of right now, the main docks that people are deploying across the country is the DJI Dock 1 and the DJI Dock 2. That is what most programs doing remote operations are built on currently. The DJI Dock 1 has been out for about a year and a half, a little longer than that, a year and a half or so now. And the DJI Dock 2 is just right for the pickings, just came out a couple weeks ago, or about a month and a half ago now. And so those 2 products, you have so many agencies deciding which one's better for their operations, which one might fit their operational capacity in a better light or whatnot. And so, but those are the 2 most robust products on the market. We're exploring other solutions as well. There's some upcoming manufacturers, Hextronics, OmniDock, Autel has an Evo Nest. So there's a lot of other solutions that we've tested and deployed even to some customers. But back to the basics, DJI Docks are what most folks are using as they start to prove out many of the programs that they have. A lot of that's the easy button for them too, because most of their fleets are already built around those types of aircraft. And so it's just very seamless for them to step into those platforms as well. So it's going to be really exciting to see what the next few years have. There needs to be a large step forward on some hardware and other solutions to really enable true DFR capabilities in a BVLOS environment. And there's a few manufacturers out there that are really charging at that. So really excited to see what comes out next.
Yeah, since we're on that, what features do you wish were on them today that you see coming down the pipe at some point, but just like, gosh, if they just had X, Y, and Z, it would really move the needle? Is there something in specific that comes to mind?
It's all around response times, to be honest, John. The DFR programs are meant to reduce response times. And so some of the technology out there today with the Dock 1, even the Dock 2, are a little delayed in getting those aircraft up off the ground. And so number one, I would say DFR programs need an aircraft that can launch and respond in a little bit quicker manner. And so there's some improvements that can be made there. Also, some of these docks for pretty small platforms. And so looking at a more purpose-built aircraft, larger aircraft potentially, that can carry different payloads, I think will be important as docks begin to scale. But what you'll find is as aircraft get bigger, docks get more complicated. There's more moving parts. There's more things like maintenance and service that need to happen on a more regular basis. And so we're in a bit of, I would say, it's not a linear motion of we improve the technology and then we get better results. We might improve the technology, but it could induce other things into that ecosystem that are needed, like more service and that sort of thing.
Now, you guys have, or might be the most experienced people of installing these dock solutions other places. You guys have had quite a few repetitions of being able to do it. And my observation has been that we've come a long way in technology. Setting one of these things up is not like pairing your new headphones to your phone, right? Like it takes some doing. They need data, they need power, they need to be positioned correctly. And there's lots of other parameters to keep in mind. What does that installation process look like typically when you guys lead an agency through it? And kind of what's the timeline it typically runs?
And so like you said, power, connectivity, and location are the 3 pillars to me for all deployments. If you don't have any one of those, you're going to be in a tough spot when you try to start to go to deploy. And so back to the basics, those are the foundational things that you have to have checked off before you even consider trying to deploy the dock on a location. Power, very simple to accomplish on many of these solutions. Connectivity gets a bit more complex because of how the governmental sector's IT networks work and some nuances to that. So there's oftentimes some different approaches. IT requires different things depending on what size of agency you are, where you're located across the country. So that's an important piece to work with your IT teams on to figure out early on. We have some deployments, some dock deployments right now on cellular and Starlink, but they're not the long-term solution either. There's pluses and minuses to each of those solutions. If you're going to have to go in a mobile type of setting like cellular or Starlink, really recommend a combination of things to make sure that you always have that connectivity. And last is location. The most prime DFR area, we've proven out the call volume. We've understood that, hey, this is where this drone needs to be due to all of those things that are more location-based for the geography might not be the best location for a piece of hardware. And so most of the docks right now are point-to-point communications, antennas from the dock itself to the actual aircraft. And so if there's a noise in the environment, whether that be cellular or other frequency noise, sometimes there can be some issues with that. So thankfully, our manufacturers have given us a toolbox with a bunch of tests to conduct before you ever choose that location. But there's a lot that goes into that. Lastly, rooftops become a coveted location for many of these docks deployments. The problem is getting these things up on the rooftops. So we've all seen cranes, fire apparatus, down at Fort Wayne a couple months ago. Might have been too windy, so we had to bring a dock off the rooftop. So a series of tow straps were involved in lowering this thing to a safe location. So there's so many different nuances to actually getting this stuff up at a rooftop or a location that's even more than the setup of the dock itself. The dock is fairly simple to set up in most situations. It's all the other factors around it that require making sure you very strategically and systematically check those boxes before you start that actual dock deployment.
So these are big pieces of equipment, right? And we set them up. We've gone through those hurdles of doing it. You illuminate us on some of them that are fairly thorny. So let's say you're an agency, you've bought one or more docks, you've got them installed in your launch sites, you're comfortable with your launch sites, you've found your emergency launch sites, you've kind of done your homework. You're ready to kind of start betaing the program and just flying, using the hardware, starting to understand your airspace a little bit better from that perspective. What's the first steps from that stage that you recommend people take? What should they be doing?
Well, in many situations, it's important to start collecting that data and start deploying in that capacity, even before you have a BB loss waiver. There's the ability to operate with RPIC in the field, a remote pilot and command in the field as a visual observer. Start gathering that data using your equipment before you have that coveted BB loss waiver. Because unfortunately, the timelines for all of these things typically won't line up. So as soon as you get that aircraft on the rooftop, that dock on the rooftop, find ways to provide value with that equipment right away, because your bosses are going to be asking, hey, how do we use this stuff that we just put up there? And if you just wait for 6 months until you have a coveted BV loss waiver, it's going to provide a lot less value back to your command staff to show you how you're working through that. There's so many improved workflows by using the dock outside of just BV loss and not having somebody up there, whether that be data management, battery charging, environmental considerations. There's many different aspects that do provide you a lot of benefit even before you get that BV loss waiver. The big disclaimer there as well is you don't need to have a beautiful built out real-time crime center to have a robust DFR program. DFR program can be one patrol officer or one detective's laptop sitting in a cubicle in the office or sitting in the ready room or someplace around the office, starting down this process of learning how to fly DFR as well as responding to calls. You don't have to have a fancy incident response awareness built around you. A radio sitting next to your laptop listening for calls for service as they come out can start to help you build those steps into one of those robust DFR programs.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've been in communities where they have fairly robust real-time crime centers that feel like you're in NASA when you walk into, again, one officer in a cubicle flying on two screens, right? And there's space for all of those programs to exist and accomplish great things.
Absolutely.
They're not exclusive to one use case or the other. This technology space that we're in is super bleeding edge. There are new announcements of advancements. It feels like every week. Somebody's doing something interesting. Someone's doing something they probably shouldn't have done. And that's also very interesting sometimes as well, too. But we're not in the space yet where I can go to my Amazon.com and order an ebook of Public Safety DFR for Dummies by Matt Rybar, PhD, right? Like, we look forward to that book when you write it. And I think it'll come, But in the meantime, are there resources that you would point people to who are kind of in the thinking, planning, building consensus within their agency, like the early stages, the embryonic stages of a program?
Yeah, doing their research and reaching out to organizations like both of ours, like first responder groups, there's a lot of great resources out there. And really, if you even look in the media about programs that might be in your area, trying to leverage other resources and learn from other people's pitfalls as well as their successes and wins, I think is going to be imperative as you start things out. Funding is the $1 million question for so many of these programs. And so for many years, these drone programs have started out funded from the grassroots effort, community foundations, community grants. Some folks dabble with federal funding if you have the right grant personnel to shepherd the process. Some agencies get very immense buy-in very early on from their command staff, and they're able to allocate funds for those programs. But funding comes in just so many shapes and sizes. We have seen over the years that if you can plug your program into other aspects of your agency, there are typically a little bit easier to get different funds appropriated for that. What do I mean by that? Well, we're seeing this major rise in real-time crime centers, and DFR data is very actionable that could be embedded in a real-time crime center. Shane Chadwick in Amarillo actually calls DFR the fifth pillar of his real-time crime center because he believes that this technology, can float and be that gap filler for other aspects of his real-time crime center. And so trying to find ways to plug into that real-time crime center funding source is just another way that you can help support the funding side of these DFR programs as they begin to evolve. As far as the ecosystem goes, there's just so many technologies right now that are being built to assist the responding officer, whether that be live 911, license plate readers, DFR programs, CAD dispatch, DFR, DSR video feeds, all of this stuff we're trying to funnel into these patrol environments. Well, the best place for somebody to really from a high level take action on all that data together is a real-time crime center where you can have a dedicated team pulling all those feeds together and really analyzing how to best take action on that data and let the responding officers be focused on responding to those types of situations and incidents. And so as you look at the more macro level of funding and planning, trying to figure out what the long-term plan is of where do we want this DFR program to go could help you identify those baseline steps of how you can get there. For some agencies, that'll be a few month process. For other agencies, that'll be 5 years, and there could be 10 or 20 years. But having a little bit of a higher level roadmap will really help you kind of navigate that process.
Yeah, I was curious in your mind when you've watched people who are starting, again, these kind of embryonic DFR programs, when you've seen them struggle, where did that struggle come from? The things I've seen has been didn't have enough drone experience under their belt, budget, community relations, and not getting buy-in across their agencies to begin with. But I was curious if there were other ones or some of the same that you've seen people struggle with.
Yeah, John, I share the similar viewpoint on those completely. All of those have happened with agencies. Really setting accurate expectations early on of your operational capabilities, of where you're at with your program. That's everything from how you're complying with FAA regulations all the way to the process it took you to get there, the technology that you have in hand. And so that is a huge hurdle. The agencies that dive in and try to run before they crawl and walk, that's where the struggles come in. And so we preach it just constantly with everything, whether it be patrol ed or DFR programs, just crawl, walk, run in this process. Make sure you're following the steps early on and trying to really navigate and get all your foundational pillars built before you just jump in deep into some of the higher level things.
So kind of in the, I'll be transparent, the shameless plug area, DroneSense does have DroneSense Remote, our DFR solution, and we're really proud of it. It's been really great to build. You've seen it in action in the real world, and I was just curious what you and our shared clients have liked about it and valued in it so far. We're just always curious how people think about it outside of our four walls.
Well, John, I'm impressed we've gotten this far into this conversation before the shameless plug about DroneSense Remote. I mean, come on. But I definitely share your love for the DroneSense Remote platform. It seamlessly just integrates so well into patrol-led deployments, which people have been using, agencies have been using DroneSense standard for many, many years for comprehensive situational awareness. I was laughing because the platform has really evolved incredibly over the last 6+ years that I've been a part of that ride. I'll always remember that first demo that I had from Brian Bracken, who was sitting in the corner of his apartment at the time, just having come out, have retired from federal law enforcement and moving into the DroneSense sector, and just the nuances to the platform at that point of running outside and trying to connect the aircraft and coming back in and this whole thing back and forth. It's incredible to see how things have evolved over the years. But DroneSense Remote is really just another value add for a robust platform. The remote aspect of DroneSense is a very small portion of a large ecosystem of a platform. And that's where I believe customers really find the value, is having that holistic program management tool. And now that we can do remotely operating of aircraft, whether it be a DFR program or on-demand DFR and other aspects, it truly does allow that comprehensive program management. One of my favorite features of the DSR platform is that, say you're on a routine DFR call, you're flying around, and all of a sudden this call turns into a barricade situation. That all that person has to do, that operators, is switch that mission type to SWAT call out or barricade, or however they identify it. And now your command staff is instantly getting blasted with notifications via Magic Video Link with live footage of that DFR aircraft. You can set that up for your SWAT commanders to get that as you change those mission types. And so that is one of the coolest features to me, is that once you're on scene, to be able to then change those mission types and notify the correct stakeholders right through the same platform. It provides an immense amount of value that's not getting on the cell phone, sending video links via text message, getting on the radio saying, hey, here's a login, go ahead and log into this feed or whatnot. So it's a very powerful tool.
Well, thank you for that. I will stop fishing for compliments. It's been really interesting to watch the onboarding with DroneSense Remote with folks, because very quickly, once people are starting to test fly, there's a moment where they say, hey, a call for service just came in. Can I go ahead and answer it? And you go, sure. And their eyes just bug out of their head about how easy it was, right? And so it's super exciting to watch. And I really enjoy that segment because of it, where we really get to help realize the value and help people manifest in their head, hey, this is how I can improve public safety in my community. I can actually move the needle on some of that stuff. Now, a lot of these agencies have any number of places they can go to buy hardware, but UVT really, in my mind, stands out a little bit as kind of an ideal partner for public safety. What do you think has made you guys so successful and a valued partner in that way thus far? It's really remarkable.
Well, thanks for that, John. I really appreciate it. And really, back to the basics of how do you support your customers that you serve is so imperative. I think people find value in UBT because we do cut through the smoke and mirrors that are out there and help with honest, holistic feedback of different platforms, different solutions, and truly try to provide them that direct approach. Because let's face it, in public safety, everyone talks to everybody. And so if you have a bad experience with a company, the entire public safety community does know about that at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Information sharing goes in all directions, good or bad, from that capacity. We really like to focus on picking a partner, not a product. There might be some shiny feature that somebody has today over a different manufacturer, different solution, but trying to understand that if you want to have people support your programs for the long duration, we want to invest in them now. So picking that partner, making sure it's not just picking a product because of that shiny, flashy aspect. We joke all the time that people probably get better post-sales support from us than they do on the sales side, because we are really here to make sure that the customers succeed. We make the customers' problems our problems. And that's really what that value-added reseller mentality brings to us. We're fortunate to have sales reps and solution specialists in over 15 states now. And so we have a local touch as well. Most of those folks are still plugged in as first responders in their local communities. And so we have that holistic approach that gives all of our customers somebody to call really 24/7 when they need it the most.
Yeah, it's a great call out too. I mean, the public safety drone community is very tight with each other, right? It feels like everybody knows everybody. So if you've got a community, I should say, if you have a program and you're missing the community part of it, please reach out. Let's introduce you to some folks. We all raise the level of the tide together. Zoom out for me one more time for a minute. You're still a young man. You've got a lot of years ahead of you in this industry. If you think about years from now, when you step away from your career, as we all do at some point, what do you want to feel like you did that made the difference? Like, what satisfaction look like for you as a professional?
You know, John, it changes all the time. And I think that's an exciting thing because it shows us that we're all on the bleeding edge of technology. If I look at a 5-year goal or a 10-year goal or even a 30-year goal for the industry, this shifts in so many different capacities. My passion, like we said from the start, is in integrating technology into public safety. And so I see at some point the drone ecosystem will continue to grow. It'll morph into other things, a part of technology and public safety. And so what I'm most excited for in the 5-year plan is to see fully BVLOS autonomous solutions a part of our public safety industry. But the long-term goals, I just really hope to continue to help move that needle in the direction of integrating this technology, getting more departments on board with using the technology, training more operators, and really just helping grow the ecosystem from the ground floor up. So it's going to be an exciting few years, that's for sure. We've talked many times about how the next year is going to have just an immense amount of growth in the industry. We think to the 5 to 10 year mark, it's going to be a whole different ecosystem, but partners like us hopefully will still be at these seats at the table at the time.
That's awesome. I mean, that's all the questions I have for you today. So it's time to pass the mic back to you for your shameless plug, or to talk about whatever you're excited about working on right now, and maybe tell the people how to get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more about UVT.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, thanks, John, for your time today. It was really awesome for the conversation. DroneSense has been such a value partner of UVT for so many years. I referenced back to 2018, but that's really when it all began with DroneSense and the UVT partnership. And so the relationship that our two organizations have and the synergy is incredible. We love working with all of your team. So again, thanks for the invite to this meeting today. Best place to get a hold of me is via email, matt@ubt.us, or you always can find us on the website at www.ubt.us. But thanks again, John, for all your time today. I just really appreciate it.
Well, thanks again for taking the time to visit with us today, Matt, and for sharing your thoughts and just being a great dude in general. I mean, I always enjoy our conversations over a meal or on a PD rooftop. So it's great to share that with the people on the internet today. And thanks again for listening to Dronecast, and we'll see you guys next time. Dronecast, Rethinking Public Safety one drone at a time, is brought to you by DroneSense. To find out more about DroneSense and how our comprehensive situational awareness platform can help you fly, share, and manage your drone program, please visit DroneSense.com. That's DroneSense.com. And then make sure to search for Dronecast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that podcasts are found. Please don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at DroneSense, thanks for listening.